All right, hello there, thrill seekers, and before I begin, I want to remind you once again that I'm going to Europe in about a month, and here are the dates that I'm going to be in Finland, Germany, and England. And if you want to know how to attend any of those events, you can go to the URL that you're seeing on the screen below, which is hardcorezen.info/events. All right, now I would like to try to answer one of my FAQs, frequently asked questions. And I find this one difficult, and I've been thinking about it all morning and trying to figure out how to answer it, because I get this question all the time. And last week I had talked about Dogen's idea, don't be a jerk. It's a paraphrase of his actual phrase, shoaku makusa, which means don't enact wrong. Don't bring wrong into the world. He says that there isn't right or wrong just sort of out there somewhere in the universe waiting to be done. He says that wrong action and right action only come into the world, only come into the universe when somebody does it, when somebody actually acts. And one of the questions I often hear when I talk about this, and I heard last week in the comments section, once again, was, do you mean you just want us to be a doormat? And this is I don't know if this is specifically an Americanism. I don't know if they use this same phrase in other English-speaking countries, but there's a lot of people who watch these videos who aren't from English-speaking countries at all, so I'll explain. A doormat, which I'm going to show you on screen right now, is that little thing that you put in front of your door and that people can walk on and wipe all the poop off their feet on before they go in the house. In Japan, I don't know, I can't remember if doormats were a common scene in Japan, but I'm kind of thinking they weren't, because you take off your shoes before you go in the house in Japan. Probably in Finland too, because I know they took off shoes in Finland. So maybe you don't have doormats in some countries, but in America we got doormats, and I think in England and other places they have doormats too. So how do you do the right thing? How do you not enact wrong? How do you not be a jerk and avoid being a doormat? So the metaphorical doormat is you're like somebody who just takes it, who just kind of goes, oh, okay, I'll just do whatever you say. Okay, no problem. And you just slink away into a corner. And some people think that that's what is meant. So I found this clip this morning by going through a whole bunch of clips of Nishijima Roshi that are on a website called shobogenzo.net. So you can go to shobogenzo.net if you want to see tons and tons of clips of Nishijima Roshi, often with me asking him questions. So you can hear my voice from 20 odd years ago asking Nishijima Roshi questions. So if you want to see those, go to shobogenzo.net, and I want to acknowledge them as the source of this clip. But I'm going to show you this little 2-minute clip of Nishijima Roshi being asked a question by my friend Rochelle, because I recognize her voice, who later became one of his Dharma heirs, and see if we can use that as a jumping off point for talking about this concept of not being a doormat. So take it away, Nishijima Roshi talking to my friend Rochelle.
I had an experience of the intuition recently. I was having an argument with my husband, and it was getting quite heated. And we were yelling at each other, and he was shouting, I don't know what, some small thing, I don't know. But I suddenly realized that I was not in a balanced state. And so my favorite trick to bring myself back to the balanced state is I look down at my feet. When I look down on the ground and look at my feet, I remember, I come back. So I was in my head arguing, so I looked down at my feet, and I came back to the present moment, and I suddenly saw my poor husband standing there yelling. So without thinking, I intuitively picked up a toy animal and threw it at him. And he was so shocked, he stopped yelling, and then he was like, oh, and everything was okay. We fixed it. We talked, he calmed down, everything was right.
Yeah.
I didn't think about it. I just did right action or balanced action, I think.
Yes.
Later on, when I looked back at it,
Yes.
it didn't make any logical sense.
Yes,
I did.
yes.
But it was, I think, the balanced state action that you always teach us about.
Yes.
I think maybe it was an example of that.
Such facts exist. So that if we keep ourselves in the balanced state, even in the war, we can find that it is not necessary to shut guns. And both fronts recognize such situation. The war will stop.
So there you go. You heard the little conversation between Rochelle and Nishijima Roshi. Mostly Rochelle was telling the story, but it's a kind of a similar story to one I told in, I think it was Sit Down and Shut Up, about a similar argument that I had when I realized that I held the sort of winning card in the argument, that I had this retort that I could use that would absolutely demolish the person I was arguing with, and instead of saying it, I saw the chain of events going, making this fire continue, and so I just shut up. I just didn't say anything, and I kind of waited for the emotional situation to cool down somewhat so that we could actually talk. So the idea, she's talking about the balanced state. Rochelle is talking about the balanced state. Nishijima Roshi often talked about the balanced state. And what he means is the balanced state of the autonomic nervous system. And this is something that one can learn to recognize. I learned to recognize it by continually doing Zazen. And when you do Zazen, I'll just talk about my own experience. Doing Zazen for long periods, I'm actually sitting outside in my backyard today, and it's really hot. It's 88 degrees Fahrenheit. I have no idea what that is in centigrade Celsius, but it's pretty hot, and it's going to get up to 96. So this kind of reminds me of what it was like sitting those long Zazen retreats that we always did. We always did it in the height of summer, I think July or August. I can't remember if it was July or August, but July and August in Japan, particularly Shizuoka, where we did those retreats, is notoriously just hot. They tell you, like, if you're planning a vacation to Japan, avoid those months because it's just hot and humid. I mean, it's not hot like Dubai or something like that, but it's so humid that even the sort of modest hotness that you get by comparison to a place like Dubai or even where my nephew lives in Las Vegas, it doesn't get that hot, but it gets so humid and muggy that it just feels like intensely awful and hot. And so in those retreats, we would do them for 3 days, and you basically be sitting Zazen all day for all 3 days. There are people that do 7-day retreats. There's people who do 90-day retreats in that kind of weather. Nishijima Roshi he insisted that Zazen shouldn't be too removed from daily life, and that's why he made his retreats short, because he thought a long retreat removed you too much from daily life, and that you should integrate the Zazen into your regular daily life. So, just that's a little aside there. But you're sitting in this really uncomfortable state. Like, Zazen is not supposed to be exactly painful, but it's kind of a balance between comfort and discomfort. So you're sitting in probably the most comfortable way a person could sit, with the spine balanced upright on the hips. That's what Nishijima always used to describe it as. But you're kind of going through a lot of stuff there. People will, if you step into a Zazen room where people are doing Zazen, a Zendo, sometimes people will look at the folks sitting Zazen and go, oh, look, they're so peaceful, and it's this wonderful, peaceful, kind of thing, and there's incense burning, and it's very quiet. You always hear bugs making noise, but we always heard cicadas making loud noises in the summers in Japan. But anyway, you're sitting like that, and you think it's all peace and calm and wonderful samadhi or whatever you're imagining. But actually, the internal experience for me and everybody else I've ever talked to who's gone through this is like, it's almost like a war. You're just like, you're at war with yourself, and you just want to get up and jump in a lake or something because it's so hot, or just move or do something else other than being here, because it's hot, it's uncomfortable, it's boring, and it's just this fight, and because it's so boring, the mind tends to dredge up whatever sort of entertainment it can find. I always describe it as like dealing with an unruly child. So it's like you have the child in the back seat during a long drive, and the kid is going, hey, come on, because the kid is bored and just can't stop talking and chattering. That's what the mind gets like when you're doing these long periods of zazen. And the only way to kind of relieve that is just to kind of stay with the sitting, just kind of cruise through it. That's the way I always felt. Just go, okay, I want to move, I want to shout, I want to scream bloody murder, I don't want to be here, I want to be anywhere else but here, and it's hot and it's sticky, and the only thing to look forward to is lunch, and the lunch is kind of not that great usually. I mean, the lunches we had were good, but nothing special. It's not going to be like you're going to get a fine meal at the end of this. You're just going to get some rice and miso soup and some vegetables. So you're just sitting there going, oh God, and then there's the work period to go through and all this other stuff. So just sitting with that can be a kind of training for learning the balanced state. And the thing about being a doormat, if you listen to the story that Rochelle told, she's not telling the story of being a doormat. She's not telling a story of letting her husband walk all over her or just giving in or anything like that. She doesn't even tell us whether she won or lost the argument. The argument was resolved. I mean, people sometimes have to express opposing opinions to come to a resolution. So this is the thing. It's not always the way to not be a jerk, to put it in my terms, or to not bring evil into the world, isn't to always just agree with everything the other person says, especially if he's a nutcase or saying something stupid or something that any rational person couldn't agree with. Sometimes it is to state very clearly what you think is true, what you perceive, what you believe to be true. This Nishijima Roshi was very good at doing, and when I was looking through those clips this morning, I was hoping to find a clip where he used his favorite phrase, which is, I don't think so. This is what he taught me. I was talking to him about how to resolve arguments, and when you're faced with somebody who just won't back down, and you just can't explain it to him, you can't reason with him, you can't do anything. And he would say that in that situation, his favorite way of responding was, I don't think so. Because you can't argue with that. How am I supposed to argue with it? He did this to me. He used this with me all the time. And I can't argue with I don't think so, because what am I going to say? No, you do think so, or you should think so, because then I'd seem like an idiot. So he would say I don't think so. Another phrase that he would use that I was hoping also to find, which I couldn't find when I was going through all these clips, was he would say, if the person would just not back down on a position that he disagreed with, he would say, well, it is your privilege to be mistaken, or it is your right to be mistaken. And he would say, everybody has an opinion in this world, and you can have that opinion if you want. And so you can't argue with that. You can't go anywhere with that. You don't need to fight. And he talks about soldiers at the front, and this is a sort of a almost fantastic sort of situation, but an extrapolation on reality. And remember that Nishijima Roshi did fight in World War II. I believe that from the stories he told me, he never saw any real action. But he must have been trained in this. He must have been trained how to fire a gun and how to kill a person. I'm sure that was part of what he was ordered to do, although I don't think he ever killed anybody during war. But so he's giving this example of if you are on the battlefield and you suddenly realize it is not necessary to shoot a gun. And if everybody at the front of the battle realizes that it's not necessary to shoot a gun, the war ends. Now, you don't need to take this literally as something that actually happens in a real war with real guns, because it happens metaphorically when you are in conflict with somebody. Now, that doesn't mean that you automatically give up your territory or you just completely fall apart. This is the mistake I think a lot of people make, and I tried to address this a little bit in a video I think last week or week before called The Niceification of Zen, where people think what Zen is all about is just being nice to everybody and agreeing with everybody. And I think a lot of people who manage large Zen institutions in America kind of fall into this. They think that the way to be nice is just to agree with everything, even if it's crazy or stupid. We just agree with it because we're the good, nice Zen people. You don't have to agree with it. You don't have to accept it. You don't have to go along with things that you don't believe. But there is another way to deal with it other than becoming unbalanced. So what Rochelle is talking about is during the argument with her husband, she noticed the unbalance. And that is something, I don't know, there might be other ways to do this, but that's something I would not have noticed except for doing Zazen for years and years. And I learned to notice when my emotional condition was getting unbalanced. And when my emotional condition is getting unbalanced, then I can't act in the right way. Even to defend my own position, even to express my own position, if I'm out of balance, I can't do that. And so my strategy is usually to do something like what Rochelle did. You kind of do something, but it's not continuing the unbalance. It's doing something else. This is not always easy to do, but as I say, it doesn't mean being a doormat. Nishijima Roshi was never a doormat. When people, like I said, I really hope to find a clip where he was actually arguing with somebody to show you how he did it. But he wouldn't back down. He wouldn't just agree with somebody just to stop the argument. What Dogen advises in, I think it's Shinji Shobogenzo. It's not in Shobogenzo itself. But he argues to just let the argument drop naturally, rather than sort of admitting you're wrong when you're not wrong. You don't have to do that. Let the argument drop naturally and find a space where you can actually resolve your differences. Because, like I say, sometimes it's important to have a contrary position to somebody else. Sometimes that is the way that the truth of the situation arises, is when people are in conflict and they find a way to resolve that conflict. You have to realize that you can't take the position of I'm right and they're wrong all the time, but you can't also, it doesn't do any good, let's say it that way, to take the position of like, I'm wrong, they must be right. Been watching what's that TV series? It's like a Netflix series. Anyway, there's some guy acting as Truman Capote, so I keep trying to imitate that voice. Truman Capote voice. You just learn how to, as Dogen says, let the argument drop naturally. And if you can't let the argument drop naturally, sometimes the best thing to do is just step away from it. You know, I can't give you specific advice on what to do because every situation is a little different. But there is a way, and to me the key is noticing when I'm getting out of balance. If I'm getting out of balance, I can feel it. There's this sort of, I can't describe it in words, but there's a sort of thing that arises where I can feel, maybe it's the neurons or something just firing too hard, and I'll start to make mistakes. Like if I'm typing in anger, I'll start spelling things wrong, or if I'm speaking in anger, I'll start saying things that I don't mean to say, that I don't want to say. But you can still have an argument and not be a doormat, and that's important. It's important to find the balance, and I don't know if I've told you how to do it, but I hope I've given you a little hint. So if you want to contribute to me giving more bad explanations for how not to be a doormat, you can go to the URLs that are in the the description section of YouTube. There's links there. Sorry, they're not URLs, but there's links. Or you can go to the URL that you're seeing on the screen below, which is hardcorezen.info/donate. That is hardcorezen.info/donate. And some people complain that the links to PayPal are not working in the description below on YouTube. I don't know why that is. The link on that URL always works, and I try to update it every time I put on a video, but I don't know why it doesn't go directly to that all the time. Anyway, so there you go. So go to that URL if you can't make it work. And by the way, I've been told there's some warning that people get that the site is insecure. Insecure, like I've got insecurity. That is BS. A guy who looked at the site, who I trust, whose opinion said that it's perfectly secure. It's just some kind of company trying to scam you to pay more money. Anyway, I might just pay more money to get rid of that. But it works. It's fine. All right. So we will see you next time. Have a good time all the time. Sorry for that lengthy explanation at the end. Bye. Hey, Ziggy, are you a doormat? You kind of look like a doormat or a little doggy rug sometimes, but we don't step on you or wipe our feet on you, do we? And you always bark if you see a cat, so you hold your own. All right. Let's go inside and edit the video. Oh, there's that bird, that mockingbird. Hear it? There's a mockingbird that sits on a wire behind the house all the time. He's back. He or she.